Okay, that one's going. Not gonna forget it now.
Might as well start the other one too.
Yeah. Hold on. I'm gonna do the same thing that I did on the other side, which is I don't want anything interrupting it. So let's put it on airplane and do not disturb. Now we can do that. How are we here? How's it look?
Okay, you could maybe even give it just 2 degrees to the right. You can still bring you in a little more. I've got room behind me and swing it towards your right. I was going to say, suddenly you got a big glare on there.
AE lock, what the hell is that? Okay, here we go.
Oh, it was auto, you know.
Okay. We're on. Hello, hello? Jensen? Do you hear me right? Yes. Hold on. How about now? Is this better? Yeah, I just noticed that it was the sound, the input was on the wrong track. Are we good now?
Okay, hi, this is Galen on the other side.
This is Dustin Garrick, 543. Okay.
And is this all good?
This is my guest, Galen Fous.
I'm good? Alright. Cool.
Wonderful, thank you, Jensen. That's your name, right? Jensen? Oh, sorry, Jason. Glad I asked. I mean, if we have guests calling in, but we don't have anybody else planned.
Yeah.
Better?
Yeah, somehow it kind of got kiltered. Now it's looking good.
Okay.
Pleasure to do this with you, Dustin.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. Feels like it's been a long time coming as well.
That was my very words in my mind. That was a long time coming.
Yeah. It's really fun. So far, yes. Destin. No worries. No, 2. Yeah. Closing that. That so I can see it there. Always making sure I close everything I need closing first. Test, I got that. Great. Great, thank you. So I guess it was probably about 4 or 5 years ago. I received a message from this woman. She's a 20-year-old blonde professional dominatrix on the East Coast. Sends me a message asking if she can interview me for some blog that she's running, and I'm really curious about it. I do some poking around on her as I can, and I'm like, sure, let's do it. And one thing led to another, and next thing I know, she's in Jamaica with me at the Hedonism 2 resort, swingers clothing optional resort for the Erotic Coast International Erotic Film Festival, where I had a short 5-minute erotic film that I created, entered, and thankfully was extremely well received. So she ended up coming as my date. That was actually where we first met in person. Ended up being at the airport there. And my oh my, I had no idea the ride that I was setting myself up for. I was, I don't know, a dozen years her senior, and yet I'm not sure who learned more through this little affair, might we say. She, as I said, she was working as a pro-dom, a professional dominatrix, and somehow she decided that I was going to be her next master. Now, I always consider myself more of a tantra guy, so to speak, really into the subtleties, the energetics component, the exploration of masculine feminine dynamics, and the spiritual components of sexuality. I may have had minor dabblings in the kink and BDSM world before, but it wasn't it wasn't really my home, you know. It wasn't really what I consider my flavor. But let's just say she put forward the right challenge, and who am I to say no? So I'm an Aries. This is how I tend to do things. The first time I ever meditated was by going to a 10-day Vipassana silent meditation. Let's wake up at 4 a.m. and start meditating until 10 p.m. going to sleep for 10 days straight without speaking. And that was my intro. So this ended up being just the same thing. It was okay. I had the most minor dabblings into the BDSM world. Now let me step up. I can't just dabble here. This is a woman who works in this industry. This is a woman who on the daily is paid $500 to $1,000 or more to tie men up and piss in their mouths, amongst other things. Okay, so if I'm going to do this, let me dive head first, let me step up. Over these next few months, how do I put this? It was my edges that I feel got pushed more than hers. I ran up against things within myself that I didn't quite realize that were there. That part of me that has been well socialized or overly socialized, overly civilized to be a good boy, so to speak, to treat women with respect, to not hurt a woman, to make sure she's always well taken care of, etc. And here's this woman wanting me to choke her, slap her, fuck her throat, devise punishments for her when she didn't do exactly what I wanted when I wanted. And it was tough. It was really hard for me. And the biggest, what I am good at traditionally has been showing up as the ideal lover. Really feeling into what is this woman's deepest fantasy, and let me be that. Let me show up as that. Let me rise to whatever that was. So, okay, her deepest fantasy was for me to be her dominant. And for her who works as a pro-dom to have this man who she can submit to. All right, let me play this game. And where I would come up against my edges, I'd find I haven't even come close to finding where her edges are. So I'd have to push through and bring up the intensity, and then I would feel myself contract inside, and I could feel her going, like, whether verbally speaking more, or I could simply just feel her energy calling forth for more, just crying out more, and I'd lean in more. And it was such a journey for me. And this is from a woman who was giving me not only constant permission, but encouragement, and at times pleading and begging for it. And I did. I rose to the occasion. A couple months later, we actually did a 3-camera film shoot that I never did bring to the light of day. So maybe if you guys poke me enough, I'll eventually edit it and put it out. but it ended up being an extremely powerful experience for me. I'm like, look, women, like, I've been around, not only have I been around the block, I've been around the globe. I've literally been, I mean, during my erotic rock star years, been with women from, you know, every major culture in the world, from every continent in the world. And I thought I had my shit down, but here you are, 20 years old, and you've taught me things about my sexuality I had no idea about, many of which are now still a part of me. More than anything, it expanded my toolkit. And the other big thing that it did for me was realize where my blocks, my inner constrictions, were keeping me from being in my truest or most authentic expression. And now, in all honesty, in the time since, I think it's been 5 years, I don't know, time's not my friend. There's nobody who I've even felt the desire to go as intensely, as much as I did with her. Yet, I have such a greater capacity, and there is a greater sense of freedom. And more than that, there is a realization that there was something about that dynamic. That playing with power, playing with dominance and submission doesn't only have to mean those over-the-top, kinky, let's create a scene together experiences. You can play with them in so many more subtle ways, and those are a daily part of my life now. And not only have I've both found the ways in which I can really enjoy it, as well as I found the ways in which, wow, at least the women that I've drawn into my life since, they are extremely responsive. Extremely responsive. Anyway, those are some of the reasons that had me want to bring my guest on today. My guest today is Galen Fous. He is I don't know, I first met Galen 9 years ago at a Sexuality and Consciousness conference. Actually, then it was called the DACA Bikini Conference in Sedona, Arizona. Basically a big Tantra conference. And he went by DACA Dom at the time. DACA being the name for a male tantric sexual healer or practitioner, and Dom being a male dominant. And so what I saw in him was that he seemed to like blending these two worlds, exploring what both these worlds had to offer and synthesizing them into his own unique expression. And I was very drawn to that because I stood out at these conferences for my own unusual, unique expression, but he did too. And so I was very drawn to the way in which he stood out, and the ways in which he wasn't just trying to pretend or put himself out as if he's all love and light all the time. So began our friendship, and now we're, I don't know, somewhere around 9 years later. And as we said, as we were setting up, it feels like this conversation has been a long time coming. So with that said, welcome, Galen Fous.
It's a pleasure to be here with you, Destin, and yeah, long time coming. I think that sums it up. So I'm really excited to be here with you and with your audience, and I really loved the intro even before you began speaking. That spoke, I think that encapsulated so clearly the game right now of men stepping up and doing so in a conscious way, you know, getting into their heart, getting into their body, getting into how to have conversations and discussions and bring clarity, how to honor agreements, integrity, and the big one that you went down into very deeply and powerfully in your own experience of sexuality. And so this is a big topic, all the things that we're talking about, masculinity and even just the sexuality is a huge topic.
So in this realm, where do you consider your expertise?
I think I'm like a guide from the erotic wilderness.
Guide from the erotic wilderness.
Yes, I've been out there. I've been trekking around the erotic wilderness for nearly 20 years, and what I mean by erotic wilderness is that uncharted territory that people haven't felt permission to go to, or afraid to go to, have been shamed because they dabbled a little bit and now can't go back, or are threatened, etc. All the reasons why people don't really cross that threshold into this is where the wealth of sexuality is.
So what are you describing as this erotic wilderness? What makes it the wilderness?
Because it's not been explored, you know.
So
it's the last frontier.
What has
not been
psychology? What has not been explored?
All that the kind I say is sex is friction, eros is myth.
Okay.
So what we've been involved in is what I grew up in, what I understood as sex was friction sex, fucking and,
Genitals rubbing against each other.
yeah, and in 15, 20 minutes, boom, okay, you had ecstasy.
And for too many men, much less than that.
Yes, that, and also, and plenty of women were not getting
very
much
well.
out of there.
Yeah.
That. So this is the wilderness is the mythic side of Eros. This is where we are calling up our sex creatures, as I like to say.
Yeah, so you referenced that when in our pre-interview. What is a sex creature?
It's a distinct persona within the human psyche that has a different body language, tone of voice, the way it looks, the way it likes to dress, the way it responds to either a command or giving the command.
So much of what you're describing right now reminds me very much of my intentional erotic rock star journey. With the creation of this, he was an archetype of my creation, and he was all those things. It was an intentional shift of how I presented myself in the world, the way I dressed, the way I spoke. My tone of voice shifted during that transformation. Both the pitch as well as the cadence or speed at which I speak both changed dramatically. Go on. What is anything else about this sex creature?
Well, it's also the wild, primitive, instinctual part of us. A lot of it is encapsulated, and that's why I think of it as a creature, because we kind of keep it caged up and don't let it out very often, except within the narrow confines that the culture allows. The rest is taboo, verboten. It's a sin. It's it's kind of like the equivalent of reefer madness, hysteria about the wilderness area of going out there is where all your demons are and where treachery is, and so people stop at the threshold, they peer in, but a lot of people unfortunately take their sexuality to the grave with them. They're so afraid of stepping in, and for good reason sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. So we're also living in a time right now where there is majorly increased conversation around things like sexual assault, rape, as well as the variety of consent issues. So how does that fit into all of this? What about those who are they're afraid of this because there's this fear that if they let this sex creature out, what's he gonna do?
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of intimidation pointed towards male sexuality. A lot of it for good reason. Men over the centuries, over millenniums, have pillaged, plundered, raped, been unconscious, meaning that they've been totally instinctual and living by, blood and guts level kind of interactions in the world. And so now we have moved far along as a species of humans, of moving into this more integrated, egalitarian, gender.
Well, I hear that, but at the same time, and there are ways in which I definitely see that, but at the same time, we have some major issues going on still when it comes to male-female dynamics and suppression and consent.
I don't really put it on things like ideological structures like the patriarchy and things like that. Sure. I think it is more just terrible sex education. If we started with our young people and started to, if you look like at Europe, how Europe introduces sexuality to kids, it's really amazing and beautiful. And so we are putting sex in such a dark place that we can't even be honest to our young people about what's going on, how to consent, what's your responsibilities, all of those types of things. I think create male and leave males encultured then by the locker room and the football field, or this aggressive place where that is going on appropriately on a football field, but not in the world. And so I think coaches, everything, all of that whole system is really the major problem.
The major problem, yeah. So we're gonna need to take a break in just another minute, but what I'm really curious about then is you're starting to touch upon what I think you're saying as a solution being a shift in how we deal with our young people particularly, which I think's part of that is how do we heal our relationship to our own sexuality so that we can model that and allow for something cleaner, so to speak, to be passed on to our young children. I do my best with the show to be less problem focused and more solution focused. Like, what can we do from here? I know that the men who tune into here, and the women who love them who are tuned into here, are those who want to do better, who want to be powerful men in the world, but along with that, how to do that, and how to do so in an ethical way, how to do so in a heart-centered way, how to be good men while succeeding in this world. So when we get back, we're going to dive into how all of that relates to this whole erotic wilderness and then some. We look forward to it. This is Destin Garrick, and you're listening to The Evolved Masculine, Redefining Sex, Power, and Success. Thank you.
All clear. Cool. You're really great on your when you speak. You've really got a nice, clear, direct, holding very complex things together. That's what I mean. This conversation is so tough because everything is opening up your whole channel. So how are we doing on keeping, or how am I doing on keeping things?
I think you're doing I think you're doing well with it. So we've gotten some definition around the sex creature. Like I said, I want to really explore speaking to that man who wants to do right and good, but also wants to feel more free, feels restricted. Like how can you help free him? If you had the next 20 minutes to free this man's soul.
Yeah. So yeah.
We're not on yet.
Yeah, I'm just kind of I can run with that.
And I'm sorry, there was another major thing you wanted to...
Well, part of this can swing into about coming a sexual authenticity, about tuning into these mythic archetypal elements. I can talk about sexual authenticity disorder in this
Great.
situation, because that's really going to get to the core of it.
I hate that voice. So this has been some interesting topics and areas that we're getting into as we're exploring the erotic myths. And I really want to use this section to explore. So for the men who are tuned in, who want to do right, but they also want to feel empowered. They want to feel their power. They want to succeed in the world with women and with work. And I really believe that those two can be really intertwined with one another, that the places where we can really restrict ourselves, where we end up disempowering ourselves, can bleed over into every other area of our lives. So how can you help free this man?
Well, I think the process is starting with intention. As a man, if you really want to get somewhere, you have to get clear about your intention. So my intention is to be an empowered man, an embodied man, in my fullness. I want to be direct, whatever I don't define it for anyone. It's personal.
I remember finding there was a little piece of paper when I had sort of a vision board. There was a cork board that I like stuck things on with pins. I just had this piece of paper that I found somewhat recently from them, where I wrote on it in Sharpie, choose, I think it was in red, choose to be powerful. And I remember at the time, like now it doesn't hold the same meaning to me, but at the time, that was a very conscious and intentional choice, because at the time when I was writing it, I had not chosen to be powerful. If anything, unconsciously, I had chosen not to be powerful. And so I think that you're absolutely right with that intentionality. Please continue.
So let's take it right into the sexual realm. So if my intention is to be a dominant, to express my dominance as a male, bring on that dimension of my masculinity in a conscious way with a partner. So if that's my intention, I'm gonna almost instantly start to have the parts of me that aren't dominant, that have shown weakness, that have backed down, that haven't stepped up, that haven't stood up for myself, that hasn't held boundaries, that has held back truth. That part is what the work is. You know, if you want to be a powerful man, you have to do your personal work. And if you choose to be a powerful man and step into that, you'll notice right away what's saying bullshit. You know,
So let's just dive into that word for a moment, because that word dominant and dominance has a lot of strong connotation to it for different people. How does define the dominance?
Yes.
Or dominance?
So the first thing is to clarify is that in the sexual realm, this is in a negotiated context with a consenting partner. That's where I express my dominance. That's where, if you're in the kink scene, there's protocols and rules and negotiation things that set up these kinds of structures that a dominant and a submissive can step into with a considerable amount of communication and all to do so safely. But once within that, you're in the container of that, so to speak, then it is about your personal dominance, what that looks like for you, of how you want to proceed with your partner. So right away, this is bringing up what's important to understand is the paradox here. You know, the paradox is, you know, how can I be a loving, tender, romantic man who was in the PTA school teaching kids and coaching and being a good citizen and all, on the one hand, consider women, love women, you know, respect women, and on the other side, be a motherfucking, you know, son of a bitch, motherfucker, you know, get your fucking ass down now level of intensity and directness, and have that be welcomed by my partner, as you said, begged for, even, you know, and this is where the depths of Eros are starting to show up, because you're embodying this persona that has yearned to come out of you for decades sometime, but you've held back because of your own internal fears, shames, judgment, and that's the work. You know, you have to do that to step into this fullness.
Yeah, so I ran into a young man this past Saturday at an event where I was speaking, who falls into a lot of what we're speaking about. He's early 20s, and seemingly his fantasies are all rooted in that level of intense sexual dominance, a way of being, but it's not something that he experiences in his physical realm. His questions were like, is that even possible to do in a conscious way? And are there really women who would want to do that with me?
Yes, the answer to that last question is yes, definitely. For 20 years I've been exploring and have had probably 100 or more partners in either a scene or a relationship, whatever, who startled me with the depths of their own yearnings, often more depraved than my own, in this taboo side. So I want to bring in this distinction now about the difference between DS and BDSM, or the distinction between DS, dominance and submission, and BDSM, bondage, discipline, sadism, and masochism. So this is kind of like the yin-yang of Eros here in this context. The dominant, submissive side is the noble side. It's the romantic, mythic side. It's the transparent side, the place where you negotiate, and as the dominant is, the point is to totally care for their submissive. They care, make sure she's safe and encouraged and blessed, and those types of things are where the dominant can step up into the energy of the king archetype here. It's a real noble place that it can go, and it's such a mythic romance. That's why people get so compelled by it, because on the submissive side, then they can step into this mythos of surrender and devotion and service, selflessness. And these are like spiritual paths almost, that devotees do things like this, you know, or people who aspire to leadership. So this is that side where you can really, it's a dance, like the tango. It's not this hard-edged, you know, wife-beating kind of old school, you know, and domestic violence. It isn't what domestic violence.
Yes, this is where that distinction, because I know this has been a long-standing challenge for the BDSM community to really help set in the public's mind that distinction between BDSM and abuse, which quite simply, in my own phraseology around that would be that where consent ends is where abuse begins. Where yeah. So, which brings to something that I feel it needs to be addressed in some form, which is 50 Shades of Grey, book and film, and that bringing BDSM stuff into the public mind in a way that's previously unprecedented, and the controversy around that, particularly within BDSM communities. Can you speak to that at all?
Let me just say that the point of all of this, I think the bigger point versus some of the issues that the movie might have had, is that there is this emergence of the more primitive, wild, instinctual part of our sexuality that hadn't been encouraged previously, but it's there. And it's a part of what a sexual identity I call fetish sexuality, kind of like homosexuality in the same vein of a sexual identity is defined. So this is a place where this emergence now, it's still in a very adolescent stage. So it's very irresponsible often and unaccountable and out of integrity.
So those are what we're seeing in the 50 Shades film is an irresponsible and out of integrity expression.
Yeah, and that mirrors what goes on in the world too, because even though people have, the kink community has been fabulous with setting up these protocols of negotiation, and then the key word in the kink community for consent is safe words. This is already negotiated in, and it's an honor, as I talk about.
So just for our listeners, what's a safe word?
A safe word is an expression that one or either party engaged in a scene, BDSM scene, can give to either alter or change what's going on or completely stop it. Especially, the stop side is mostly when, because things can get triggered in these realms of, somebody's other stuff is coming up in a moment, or they did exceed or hit the edge of their tolerance for something, or suddenly they forgot the oven was on, or whatever.
And so what do you do? Again, how do you...
So if a safe word is given, it's like I just stop. So for one thing about this as a dominant, and this is what people who are stepping into dominance need to let themselves embody and be present in, and you'll be aware of a shift or a change in your partner. That's not in the dance that you're doing together. You can tell when something's off key or not right before they say something themselves. Most of the time, that's my experience. I'll see it because the body is expressing it. The shade of skin color.
So that's the thing about being a good dominant is you have to cultivate a deep listening, a deep awareness, a deep attunement process. This is one of the things I really found where, again, I came into the kink world after years of being in the tantra and energetic sexuality realms, and so as I entered it, I just noticed, wow, there are all these things I can bring, these skill sets that I acquired through my tantra world into here, including that deep attunement process, that feeling into my partner or lover here, and following the energy. Listening and following into that energy. The thing that my submissive that I spoke of said to me, she said, "Yeah, I get that. You say that you're new to this, but you're a natural for this because you have the skill set of being able to feel out where somebody's edges are and gently nudge them beyond those edges to that place of growth point in a way that feels." That just causes growth, that seems to capture that combination of nurturance and maybe a little harshness at times as needed, but all with that deep listening. And I think that deep listening is what you're speaking to, that it's not blindly being the fuck out of somebody. You need to be, what is going on with this person? Where are they? Where is that edge? And then how do you play with that edge so that you're neither pushing it so far that you're breaking the person, nor pulled back so much that she's bored.
Yeah, well, we're covering a lot of territory here, that's for sure. So, I want to just check. So, the BDSM is the taboo side. I talked about the noble side. This is what we stepped in here just to qualify that. We stepped into the profane side. So that's the yin yang of Eros, the sacred and profane is this noble side of DSM, the profane side of BDSM, where one is you also kind of cross back, and that's a teaching side, whereas a dominant, if you are in the right headspace and if you know your stuff, if you've examined your own stuff, you can, if someone truly aspires to be in service, and so they can be supported, by their dominant to achieve that,
I definitely fall more into that category.
Yes,
please continue.
and that's part of this noble
the other side of
mythic,
it.
but yeah, but to step into the other side of it, we're stepping into this primitive nature, So this is where we're bringing on. This is what I talk about in the shadow side allowed into the container. That's a consensual allowance of shadow, and the shadow is in many ways our heritage as mammals and reptiles. Hot-blooded mammal. Puffed up, just, tone of voice, this aggressive fierceness, this is, yeah, like that, fuck yeah, exactly. So this is natural to us, like you said, she said, oh, you don't even need to know. I mean, on that side of the noble side, yeah, but it's the same on the primitive side, men and women all know the postures and gestures of alpha, beta, pecking order, kind of orientation. That's why some of the mythos is so beautiful, where, like, if you have a protocol to have your sub enter the room crawling and bowing her head down before her, she's like a cat moving, this life spirit that I can respond to almost as the alpha cat, that rises in me. I can just feel that stirring.
I do like kitties.
Meow, meow. And the harsher side then is the cold-blooded reptilian energies, where we have that side too, where, someone can just be totally coldly cruel of, just grabbing something and pinching really hard and say, how's that feel? With the kindness in there, but to add to the cruelty, basically. So mind-fucking going on.
So what would make somebody, first of all, I know that we're particularly exploring in this conversation masculine dominance, and in this case primarily on feminine submission. Of course, I'll own it for myself. If I'm forced to pick a label, which I'm never a fan of, I'll take switch. I've certainly found myself more in the dominant role about 90% of the time. Honestly, the biggest reason is because I've just been better at it generally than partners that I've had, so it's easier for me to step into that role. But in the hands of a competent dominatrix, I'd willingly submit. I'd willingly give myself to it, and I would fully enjoy it. So I do want to just preface for our listeners that it's not that this is a role that you're supposed to be in. More than anything, I want this to simply be, if there's some stirring in you with these desires or with these urgings, I want this to be permission to explore, as well as hopefully good initial frameworks on how to do so safely, consensually, and powerfully for both you and your lovers.
Yeah, exactly. That permission piece is very important. Sexuality is your birthright. You have every right to be exactly who you are, whether you're a dominant erotic sadist or a submissive masochist or genderqueer or this pantheon of sexual identities.
It's a very strong statement. Very powerful.
Yeah, so I'm an advocate for people's sexual rights. I believe this has to be all across the board, but today we're just keeping it to your personal. How does an individual claim their birthright and step into this? So yeah, not an easy question to answer, and we're going to touch on as much as the elements that we can today.
Yeah, so I think that the big thing that you touched upon as well, this notion of negotiating consent, and how the BDSM community has all these protocols on how to do so. But I'm also curious, to explore for listeners, like how do you do so in a way that doesn't ruin the mood, so to speak, that set things up? These are some of the, in fact, preferably in ways that can make it hotter in the process. And people are so around consent issues today. How do you do so in a way that just that builds the heat rather than dissipates this? So this is something that I want to explore after we're back. And in the meantime, there's one more piece I wanted to hit. When it comes to our sexuality, our fetishism, there's no end to what we can explore. There's no end to what we express. And more than anything, I really liked your phrasing around this is your sexual birthright. To be exactly who you are. And I also want to lastly explore with you, what do you do when those things are feel problematic in your life? So all of that when we return. Again, this is Destin Garrick with my guest Galen Fous, and this is the Evolved Masculine, redefining sex, power, and success. I got a little stumbly at the end.
No, you did great, man. This is such big territory. It's
so big.
Yeah, but it's a good conversation. I mean, I think it's going good, and we're getting enough out there. I think that anybody who's close to wondering about more, will step further along.
Yeah. So again, the two things I want to make sure that we hit, that I referenced at the end is negotiating consent, and again, that's a huge thing itself. But how much can we get across with how little?
Yeah.
And what do you do if you feel fear or find that your sexual desires, or what you may think of as, okay, this is my sexual birthright, but what if you find it problematic?
Yeah, like compulsive.
I don't know.
Well, yeah, it's all in that side. This is that one. Is it sex, porn addiction, or sexual dishonesty? And
I really like your perspective on this. So.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Do you want to lead with that?
If you want to, you're going to intro it, then you mean, and lead with it?
Yeah.
You'll start it up?
Yeah. Authentic sexuality disorder?
Sexual SAR.
SAD.
SAR.
What's the R?
SAD.
It's sad.
Yes, very.
I really hate her voice. Sexual authenticity disorder, SAD. It sounds quite sad. So, we were discussing this during the break. What exactly is sexual authenticity disorder?
Well, I think it's one of the more prevalent disorders that's really undiagnosed or not looked at or not understood or acknowledged. Versus, the whole conversation now is around sex addiction, porn addiction, all these kind of negative activities which are acting out in shadow. So and the reason they're in shadow is because of sexual authenticity disorder, which is defined as a fear of revealing or someone else discovering the true nature and frequency and style of your sexuality, your personal sexuality, your baseline.
I think that's actually extraordinarily common.
It's a pandemic, to be honest. I mean, these sports figures and politicians and other celebrities kind of getting busted in their little peccadillos is just the tip of the iceberg. This is going on in every community over and over and over again. It brings this fall from grace for the person who's been caught. And I believe that isn't and then they're vilified and crude, just.
And then that only increases the sexual
authenticity. Yeah, they're already in shame. The reason they're hiding and sneaking is because of their shame, and now they've gotten even further shamed. And
but that further shame doesn't just affect that celebrity figure. It ends up affecting anybody who carries the similar types.
Yeah, they're a model. They're a lightning rod for. But this is such a common thing that goes on, and it's. Of this disorder natures, I kind of satirically refer to it. I don't follow the DSM, and I don't believe in diagnosis and such. But I kind of coined this as to model something that's going on of the fear of being honest or showing one's sexuality. Maybe someone's in an erotic mismatch, which happens because we're so outdated in our dating culture that this idea of negotiation, as we spoke of bringing it to the fore. Sexuality should be right in the front end conversation in modern dating protocols.
Sure. So how do we do that? What's the solution here?
Well, I think everybody's got to find their own way, but I think there is emerging a lot of things, as we talked about in the kink community, where negotiation is right out front. And this is what I believe is really critical and important. It's so far away from happening, I don't know the pathway to get it there other than continue to model it and speak to it. But it's in, right now the dating protocol is you go out to a bar, you get drunk, the dance club, whatever, and you're trying to pick somebody up and you have no idea about that person's history or yours. And
on top of that, I mean, I think the most people do not want to hear about their lover's sexual past. And if you turn that off, you don't want to hear about their sexual past because of the insecurities or what have you that brings up in you. And how do you really get clear on who this person is sexually and what the desires are? Because I think that the prevailing idea is that your sexual desires are supposed to be me. I'm supposed to be your sexual desire. If it's anything other than me and exactly how I'm showing up right now, then there's probably something wrong with you. Unless there's something wrong with me. Guys, is there something wrong with me?
Yeah, it's so confusing. I mean, people are stuck in this really outdated model of how these things should be done. And it's fine if someone is monogamous, wants to be monogamous, and they make that agreement, then they should stick to that agreement. But they should do that with the full analysis of what one's sexual preferences, desires, frequencies are. Otherwise, the one with the least sexual desire runs the show about how much sex goes on.
I think that's definitely the norm.
Yeah, and that's not living up to your birthright if you're the one that isn't there. So you have a right to negotiate that. But to bring it back into this dating thing, I mean, I would recommend, I only date, for the last 20 years, I've only dated online. I see somebody's I have a profile up, it clearly states all about me, what I'm into, what my edges are, where I am about, and then I look at profiles that, this person seems matching up, versus, I'm standing in a bar, there's a woman standing over there. I have no idea whether or not I would want to engage her.
Yeah, but maybe you're attracted. Maybe you have pheromones firing up.
Yeah, well, that would happen. Okay, so say someone just spontaneously, boom, they're right here, and if there's something going on and it's ready to go, then you say pause. So listen, this is hot, and I'm interested, and this is really engaging, and but I want to understand more fully kind of what your intent is and where your edges, what I could do, what would be permissible.
Yeah, I mean, particularly for you, as a strongly identified sexual dom or dominant man, how do you have those initial conversations with a near stranger, a woman who you're just getting to know, saying, "Oh, by the way, this is what I'm into. Are you down?"
So very rarely would I engage or take the effort to engage someone spontaneously out of the blue, because I'm usually, when I'm talking about engaging someone, I'm talking 3 to 5 hour ritual entrance into the inner chamber of BDSM.
Whoa, that's a very... Let's break that down. A 4 to 5 hour entrance into the inner chamber of the BDSM... What?
Yeah. So I kind of have this model of an inner and outer chamber. The outer chamber is the noble DS side that we spoke of. That holds the inner chamber, the taboo, forbidden BDSM side inside. So the center of the inner chamber is the same center as the outer chamber. So is this
like your red room?
This is, down in the red room. This is where the bad boys play. But yeah, so I mean, it's whatever. So, ritual space is simply whatever you have available that you can make, whether you have a permanent space or a setup on the fly. You just do what you can to make it ritual space. But what that means is it's a negotiated container that what goes on in there has already been well considered about what's in bounds, what's out of bounds, what safe words are, what is desired. and then all hell can break loose.
So again, using the cultural 50 Shades reference point, so do you have everybody sign a contract? How deep do you go with this, and what's that process like?
There's no contract. I mean, there could be a contract if in a long-term relationship, which is simply contract is a kind of a charged word, and that's why it can be popular because people like slave contracts and this idea of chattel and property and legally binding.
Sometimes we like those charged words and those
Yes.
extra taboo.
Yeah, so they're hot to use, but this in the outer chamber, it's not about that edgy mythos. It's about clarity and transparency. And so if I engage with you, my protocols are this. This is my expectation. Is there any questions?
So this sounds all fine and good for somebody who's a 20-year veteran. What about the person who's like entering into this for the first time, who's carrying their own fears, their own insecurities about this? They're doing their best perhaps to puff out their chest and put on like they're confident and know what they're doing, but they've never done this before.
Yeah, well, they just stepped onto the wrong path right there to start with, So the place to start from is you have to do some practices to learn how to be embodied, how to get present, how to breathe, how to have your intention clear. So if you do engage someone, you're not fumbling around, fiddling around, fidgeting around. You're direct, You speak what's on your mind. Hey,
because that's really what that dominance is. It's an energy first and foremost. It's an energy that you're dropping into, and it starts with really being rooted in your body. This is the part that I continue to that is an ongoing part of my repertoire. That which I thoroughly love. It's just dropping into that energy, and so much of it can be done just with the eyes.
Yeah.
Even with the eyes, a slight tug, grasping behind the neck or into the base of the hair, and I think that's in the lighter ways.
It's in your blood. All those actions are really classic gestures. That have probably been around for tens of thousands or millions of years, even. So they are very powerful. But it is about getting. Learning, see, this is a hard thing for most men, is learning to be present and embodied. What does that mean? How do I do that? I don't know. I'm always in that, so this is
always in your head, running from one thing to the next.
Yeah, this is why, getting into yoga practices or conscious movement practices, anything. So that's a recommendation, if you're a man wanting to step into your dominant, erotic nature, learn to be embodied. That's what women can, respond to. Like, well, this guy's in his body. He's looking right at me. He's speaking right to me, and he's saying, "Holy shit!" That gets a woman's attention if she's so inclined in that regard.
Yeah, very much. So, I run a 6-month men's program called the Evolved Masculine Path, and that element of embodiment and deepening into that presence is the core foundation of everything else, and it's for precisely the reason that you're speaking of. In fact, just a few weeks ago, we had our one of our retreat weekends, the Understanding and Gratifying Women weekend, and during one part of it, we had one of the guys who came up through the program came in and did a scene with a woman. There was a shibari or Japanese rope bondage scene, and played with pain, played with impact. More than anything, I wanted the men present to. Well, first of all, it started with negotiation. They modeled in front of everybody like how they communicated everything and how detailed they got with this, and how I really also believe that the more intense you want to play, the better communication skills you have to develop. And so they did so. They set a very clear and powerful container, and that clear container is what allowed the rest of the magic to occur. And it was beautiful. It was hot and and impactful for everybody involved.
Yeah, and that's the sex creatures dancing. When they get liberated and free, they're beautiful in their expressions as much as they can be profane or off the charts in some way. And it is authentic energy really coming forth. But a quick note on this idea for men about embodiment and being present is, okay, so take a flogger or take something that you can represent as an instrument that you would hit with. and just put a pillow down on the couch or something and just
Hit it.
take a few whacks and just see. So what's going on? Even you can video yourself like they do with your golf swing. You know? This is for your cane swing. I should probably start a video class on that, of analyzing their floggers. But let your body, you know, notice first of all, how smooth is it flowing? How does it feel? Are you unrestrained? Can you feel where you're holding back a little bit? And just let yourself let your body do that. If you start letting your body do that, it'll start to, in your mind, then start to go, okay, yeah, I got this down. I can feel that. Because it is about feeling, you know, all these things are, you know, being aware of your body.
So, how would people listening find out more about you and your work?
Yeah, I'd love to have people check out more. There's a lot more to see on my site, galenfous.com, GalenFous.com. That my book is there, Decoding Your Kink, the guide to explore, share, and enjoy your wildest sexual desires. It's been very well received by Destin as well. He wrote me a great review. Thank you, by the way. Personal erotic myth surveys. You can go there and take a 40-question survey that brings you into closer touch with some of the unconscious or the deeper parts of your eros that you might not have been consciously aware of, but are, you know, kind of something's lurking around.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Any last words of advice for our listening audience?
Practice sexual honesty, practice sexual empowerment, practice sexual authenticity, claim your birthright, practice stepping up and speaking your truth, practice negotiating for what you want.
Very well said. Very well. And I love that you said that word practice, because you hear that a lot during the show. It's that element of that path of mastery. It's not about, okay, you do this, you know, do these 3 things tonight and you've got it. No, it's a practice. It's a never-ending journey. It's a never-ending attunement and getting better and better and better at this. So as far as practicing sexual honesty, maybe that feels really far into you. Any little step in its direction is part of that practice. And then you take the next step. And the more that you do it, the easier that it becomes. This is powerful stuff. And this is what I want for you. I want you to be in the fullness of your power in life. Your sexual power, your power in your expression of who you are as a man in the world, and how you experience life. To experience that success not just in the bedroom, but in the boardroom and beyond, and to create a really positive impact in the world. I want to thank you all for being here with me, and we will see you next week. This has been Destin Garrick, the Evolved Masculine, redefining sex, power, and success. See you next week. And thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was great,
Jason.
We covered so much,
and there's so much more.
Yeah, I thought it went pretty smooth, really. Enjoyed our...
Let me stop here for a second. If I want to take a oh, shit.